Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. I'm so thrilled. We have Chris Weitz, film producer, and his first novel for young adults. It's called The Young World. You got to read this one. Well, Chris, welcome to Naperville and Anderson's Bookshops.
Thank you for having me to both places.
This is an easy thing for us. I've been waiting to talk to you about this book. We've been thrilled with it, and just your whole background and bringing to this book. But the book has literally only been out since the 29th, so literally 4 days.
It's a newborn.
It's a newborn, but it's out in the world.
It is out in the world.
It's on shelves now.
It's on real shelves.
So how does that feel? This is your debut novel. It's been delivered and now it's out
pretty
there.
Exposed. I mean, on some level, strangely, I did never quite realize that people are going to be taking the book home and reading it. I keep on thinking, especially because there's some difficult material in it.
Sure.
As far as a YA book goes. I keep on thinking I'm going to get lynched by an angry mob of parents, like Frankenstein or something.
Well, maybe Frankenstein when that first came out, people, but no, absolutely not. I think some of the themes in this book are absolutely brilliant, and I think we need more YA with these type of themes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's a dystopian YA, and I'm going to say it's a little bit higher YA than a lot of that's out in the world right now. But considering what it's about, and considering that it's more of a contemporary sort of YA, there's no paranormal much activity in this. Basically, it could happen tomorrow in a way. It has that much realism in it. So where did that germ or that spark come for this book?
A couple of sources. One, I'd actually been thinking about this ever since I was a kid. I think that there's an aspect of wish fulfillment for kids and for teenagers who would just prefer it if they were accountable only to themselves and their parents had no authority, or better yet, were just somehow magically gone.
Right.
But because I sort of set out to make this quasi-realistic, at least that was the sort of standard I was trying to hold the characters and their feelings up to, they had to die. They couldn't just be raptured out.
Well, it's sort of like the Boxcar Children, but maybe on steroids.
Right.
Let's put it that way.
So yes, it's post-apocalyptic, but my main concern is sort of how we live now, as reflected through that genre. Right.
So what are you hearing from readers? Because so many people know you from your film work and being a producer and a screenwriter and a director, but is it different getting those reviews from readers instead of a film critic or Rotten Tomatoes or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. Well, everyone, of course, is rather nice to your face, and then occasionally I will check online to see how things are going, and inevitably you sort of tend to take the 1-star review or reviews more to heart than the 5 stars.
Yeah.
You just think the 5 stars are gullible fools, and the 1 stars have somehow seen into your heart.
No, you have to blend the two. But it got a really nice Kirkus review. It got other book list review. I read those. Very nice reviews.
No, it's really heartening that people are seem to be sparking to the kind of stuff that I was concerned with, which is that people are alive to the focus on race and class and gender, and dare I say economics, which is kind of not exactly the hot sort of topic in YA literature, but it matters to me.
Yeah. Well, and those themes are very much in this book. So it's sort of it's a post-apocalyptic world. Excuse me. Kids, when you're a teenager, everyone dies from this mysterious plague. So basically, everyone younger than teens and everyone older. And so this premise that when you reach that age, or when your hormonal levels balance out and you're sort of into that adulthood,
you're gone.
You're gone.
So I mean, you can point at. I mean, Logan's Run had the notion that at a certain age people were eliminated. Lord of the Flies has done this sort of young people left to their own devices gag. In some ways, there's nothing new under the sun. So it's a bit of an old chestnut, especially the virus is the apocalyptic kill-all du jour, kind of.
Yeah.
But the fun thing about the virus in this book was that I was able, because the National Academy of Sciences has set up a program whereby you can meet prominent scientists so that you don't get things wrong or as wrong as usual. I was able to talk to Dr. James Giordano, who is a brilliant bioweapons expert, and we came up with a way that only the teens could be left alive.
So, and that sort of has to do, without any spoilers, that maybe a possible cure is out there too.
If a possible cure is out there,
right,
of course.
Yes, of course.
You have
to
have a mysterious virus.
Well, you have to have that hope, right?
Yeah.
That hope. But it's also too, you know, all the research you must have done, because this is New York City, and it's just in the very near future, you know, but it's all about the survival and all the things that would happen to a society of teenagers that are left to their own devices when infrastructure is falling apart. You know, it's survival techniques, it's all those things. So besides talking to scientists about viral infections and disease, what other kind of research did you do?
Well, so a little look into the world of preppers, which is to say people who are getting ready for the end of the world, and in some ways seem to be kind of excited about it. You know, the kind of people who jar their own food and stockpile ammo and guns and things like that, and they figure out all kinds of interesting ways to generate electricity and heat, and that's sort of an interesting world.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I do like doing as much research as possible without sort of overdoing it. I mean, in this case, because it was supposed to take place sort of a couple of years after the collapse of society, the idea of being realistic was kind of the bar. It's kind of like when you're doing, if you're doing a movie, if you're doing visual effects, it's much harder if the effects are supposed to be photorealistic as opposed to stylized. So this being a recent apocalypse as opposed to kind of a dystopian future where you can kind of reinvent the world, it made it a bit difficult at times to kind of try to get my facts right. Fortunately, I grew up in New York, and I'm really writing about a lot of the places that I know and love. So that landscape was pretty familiar to me.
So was it fun to destroy New York in some ways?
Yeah, I think it is.
In your teenage mind, you know?
Yeah, well, we always hurt the ones we love, and, you know, poor New York keeps on getting trashed in various movies and books and whatnot. And I think it's because it's such a rich environment culturally and visually to kind of mess around with. I started to think about these places as landscape and as nature and wilderness, rather than kind of urban environments per se. So it's amazing to try to reimagine the New York Public Library
those were great
Grand Central
scenes.
Terminal.
Yes, and Grand Central was incredible to read in there. And you could tell the filmmaker in you, the visual part of this book was really incredible. So.
Thank you. I'm not a very responsible filmmaker, in as much as all the places in which I chose to set the books are very, very difficult to shoot in, almost impossible to actually hire out, and probably incredibly expensive. So I kind of made it difficult for myself if I'm to adapt it.
Adapt this to the screen, right. So, you know, the neighborhoods and the one, sort of, the society is somewhat, it's gone into gangs. There's a lot of violence and the things, what happens when the teens are left to their own. But, you know, Union Square, and thinking of neighborhoods, when you think of upscale and more wealth, and there was kind of that divide, as you mentioned, the economics of what's going on. So a lot of the themes you put into this story, you know, there's race, you know, there's, you know, the sexuality between female and male, and also there's a lot of violence. I mean, kids are creating guns with 3D printer, you know, all the things that, but it has a lot of what modern technology, what teens have access to today, becomes sort of that cultish, but there's religious factor to a lot of this and the way they look at it in this society now, which I thought was really, really interesting part of the story.
Well, I mean, I think in any situation nowadays, when chaos hits, some people become more religious and sometimes fetishistic. You know, once the structures of authority are loosed, all kinds of things can happen. Yeah. Not just bad things. I think, you know, in Lord of the Flies, it's very clear that William Golding had a very cynical view of human nature, which, you know, at the slightest prompting, people will return to a kind of Stone Age barbarism. And I think that that's true of some people and groups, and in some cases, people will probably manage to get along, especially people who've been used to living in difficulties.
Yeah, sure.
And some people will try to make a go at a better world.
Yeah, and also become better people in some ways, depending on the circumstance or the situation.
Well, yeah, I think that you know, we're pursuing a lot of false idols now. There are all kinds of desires that are created for us that we want to fulfill that don't really necessarily have much to do with us as human beings. And once sort of reduced to a state of immediate need, food, shelter, clothing, it changes the way that people think.
Sure, sure. So the book is told from two perspectives of two teens, and there's Jefferson or Jeff and this girl named Donna, kind of his girlfriend in the book. And I love the way just even the font changes. So you're seeing it visually change because it's a different voice telling their story. But I love the way that they're not the typicals, but in some way they are the typicals. He's the nice guy, you know, the guy who, you know, his older brother Wash has of course reached that age where now he's gone too, and now he's the head of this tribe now in a way, and then she's that tough girl. But boy, I loved her character. She's snarky, she's sassy, but I love the way she tells you in the book and says, you know, I'm one of those reliable narrators. You can trust me.
Right.
And right off the bat, you know,
red flag.
It was, but it's part of her personality, which was so great.
I like her. I like writing her. I think that she's a lot more clever than the register in which she speaks seems to indicate. So she's very slangy. She's probably an uptalker who ends sentences with questions. But that aside, she's terribly smart. Everybody's smart as Jefferson, who's much more kind of theoretically bookish and sophisticated. But really, what authority he has is basically inherited by default from a much more aggressive and confident older brother who's passed away. Right.
So some of the origins of these characters in people you know, family members, anybody?
I think certainly Jefferson, the nerdy boy, is me at around age 17. He's half Asian, partly in tribute to one of the girls who inspired me to write the book in the first place. He was one of my advisors, as it were.
Okay. All right.
And
cool.
And Donna is maybe the girl I wish I had met. Although if I had, I would have probably been happier and studied less. Yeah. So never did.
Well, you know what? The book surprised me with how much humor is in it, and there are literally a few laugh out loud places in this.
Oh,
book.
Thanks.
But that to me is a real balancing act to put those aspects in it, and because there's a lot of serious topics in this book that I think, and it's definitely a page turner. You just want to get to the end. You want to know what's going to happen, and then you left us hanging at the end. With no spoilers, but you leave us hanging at the end. But you know, that whole mix of the humor and everything, is it something that you had to sit down and really outline, or is it something you sat down and let the writing surprise you as much as it does us when we're reading it?
There's a degree of outlining. I think you can outline the plot of things. You certainly can't set yourself up for humor. It either has to sort of, in theory, spring from whatever state of mind you're in when you're writing the character or not. So no, that's kind of endemic to however it is that I write. And I mean, I think we can't survive without a sense of the absurd and humor.
Right.
So these characters would be mad without
That's right.
being able occasionally to reflect on how ridiculous.
Yeah, and there were some very absurd characters in there that really do make you laugh. So you talk about Jefferson being you as a 17-year-old. So how did you channel that voice for the characters in this book?
I mean, it's such a difficult. So this is my first book, and I found it immensely difficult to write, especially in comparison to screenplays that I've been writing for 20 years or more, and so it's kind of become second nature. Dialogue comes relatively easy because I'm used to trying to imagine the cadences of people's voices and writing for different actors, and so in a sense I'm creating an imaginary actor in my mind, and I begin to think that that's sort of part of the business of writing a novel is entertaining these sub-personas within your own mind and trying to, in theory, listen to them. The tough thing is all of the stuff that I would normally depend upon really talented crew people to do. Say, production design,
So
choreography, the action scenes. I usually have like a second unit director can do all the hard stuff.
Sure. But it must have been really satisfying when you finished this one and knowing that it's going to be a trilogy, right?
Yes, everything has to be a trilogy.
So this must have been really satisfying. I mean, not that all your accomplishments before this, but knowing that the first one's done, and knowing that maybe the second one will be a little easier.
I think it is. It's already easier. I'm writing it these days, and it's I'm much less riddled with self-loathing, which I think goes hand in hand with writing a novel in many cases.
Oh yeah, I hear that constantly.
So that's going better, and I do love it. I mean, I sort of want to sit back and see what comes of it. It's really interesting when people take to heart something that you've written and even have opinions about characters that you've made up, and they feel them and imagine them in their own right, which is pretty extraordinary.
So a young adult novel, did you set out to write for a young adult audience? Because we know, and this book especially will have a huge crossover to adult readers.
That would be cool.
Yeah. It will definitely have that. But knowing that, did you set out to write for that audience? Because when we think of what we had when we were younger, when we were teens or young adults, there was some stuff out there that was great, but not nearly.
Well, there's an avalanche of young adult fiction.
All right.
Yes, I did write it specifically for a YA audience or an audience that is open to young adult literature, and I don't think that necessarily means that there's a certain age group.
Right.
To me, well, first of all, the actual young adult readers of young adult fiction are probably the most avid and voracious readers that I can think of, and that was the way that I was when I was that age. I also think that YA avoids a preoccupation with literary style that alloys you to kind of get to the heart of things with less embarrassment and about dealing with big topics and asking big questions and talking about big feelings. I find that incredibly refreshing, and that's kind of why I love YA.
Well, some of the films you've directed, when you think of The Golden Compass or New Moon of the Twilight series, and some of the other films that you've done, how did those experiences? And I know you did some screenwriting on some of these, adapting original source material from a book. But how did those experiences and writing those screenplays? How did that help you develop the style and working on a young adult book like this?
Well, I think the good thing is that if you are adapting a book into a movie, if you're trying to do it well, you have to become incredibly familiar with the cadences, not just of the characters, but of the writing itself. You should get so familiar with the material that if you had to, you could sort of pastiche a chapter, or you can, I mean, it's often the case that you have to make up dialogue for characters that have been written in a book, and you have to make it up not from whole cloth, but from your sort of your sense of what's appropriate to the work. So I got to spend a lot of time in Philip Pullman's world, and he is a great author, and that was a tremendous learning experience. I mean, the business of turning a book into a movie is really, it involves throwing a lot of stuff out and condensing things and kind of boiling things down. And actually, it's a habit that I sort of had to break myself of, which is to say you have a lot more latitude in a novel to digress, to explore interesting sort of side topics, and whereas a movie is really a machine for story. And there's very little time to, at least in American movies, to kind of stop and think things over.
Right. So a movie like About a Boy, which is one you directed, and that, how do you feel about books and being the original source material that end up, you know, being a movie, and looking at original screenplays, and knowing that I'm guessing you're going to adapt these, write the screenplays, and then hopefully direct a movie of this book, and seeing that there's some authors who've done all three. You know, I think of Stephen Chbosky in Perks of Being a Wallflower. He wrote the book, he wrote the screenplay, and he directed the film. It was absolutely
that's very
wonderful.
rare. Yeah.
And then I think of those who go in reverse, like Graham Simpson. He's an Australian writer who wrote The Rosie Project. He wrote a screenplay, but then decided a book was better. Now he's going back and writing the screenplay, and an original process. And so I know it's Greenland. It's going to be a film. But how do you feel about the books? And now it's your own book, and what you may be doing with this book instead of someone else's book.
Well, so we're in an era of adaptation because movie studios are terrified that that if they make a movie which doesn't already have a grasp on the public's attention, they're going to lose all of their money. So we'll see more and more of those. Given that that's the case, well, first of all, I don't think that every book works well as a movie. I certainly don't think books need to be turned into movies, and sometimes the movies do books a disservice, mostly because it concretizes in people's minds what a character looks like and sounds like, and it can even warp their memories of the book itself. So there's a danger to it, and in retrospect, having made The Golden Compass, I'm not sure that I would make that decision again.
Oh, interesting.
Because I was headed down a road to disaster with that movie in some ways, because the material that was in it was really difficult for a studio to imagine putting out there, especially at the cost of $200 million. So the result was something that to me looked a lot the way that it should, but that had been re-edited by the studio because of their fears of this. I mean, the fact of the matter is that in books you can handle much more theoretically toxic or difficult or challenging material than you can in film. However, I also think that in many cases, you know, the book is still there. The movie actually hasn't damaged any of the words or burned any of the paper or any of that. And at the very least, you know, a movie getting put out leads to a spike in book sales because people are paying more attention to it.
Going back to the book. So will this be easier for you, writing the screenplay and putting this on the screen, than taking another person's original novel? Yeah,
I think so, because I try to be very careful. I mean, I've adapted three novels to the screen. I try to be very, very careful to do as much justice as possible under the circumstances. And so that involves a lot of back and forth with the author, and also, you know, trying to be tremendously respectful, and that's kind of quite a balancing act. Whereas with my own book, I can throw things out.
That's right.
It doesn't trouble me as long as I sort of feel that I'm doing justice to sort of my initial instinct.
So this book, I think it says a lot about teens and what they're capable of. but they're also, it talks a lot about age, you know, and what we handle at different ages of our life, you know. And I think in this one, you know, being forced in these catastrophic situations and these horrific situations, but also knowing how to navigate society in a much different way. And it's showing the wisdom that these kids get. And also, too, I think just it says a lot about teens today and people of that thing. Was that something you set out to do, or was it something just throwing them in this situation and see what happens? You know?
Well, I think, so I even found that using the word teen kind of difficult, because it's a tremendously kind of limiting word. So what I tried to do was to think of the particular kind of socioeconomic position of these people who, I mean, if you talk about teens now, really it's people who are kind of physically mature. They can do all of the dangerous and amazing things physically, biologically, that adults can. But they don't have any legal, social, or financial power except through their parents, in a way. So then, what happens when this force is unleashed by the collapse of society? And I think that teens today are have tremendous access to much more knowledge and contact and connections than any generation ever has, for good and bad. And at the same time, I also think, like, we've really landed them in it. You know, we are on the verge of destroying our climate. We have set up a society in which they are expected to judge themselves by how sexy they are, and at the same time they're kind of prevented from really expressing themselves except through sort of very channeled ways for the financial benefit of large corporations. And it's I think it's a tricky business to be young.
So you know, the cliffhanger at the end of this book. So we know there's going to be a second and a third book. So can you tell us a little bit about them without any spoilers? But also, too, when you think we'll see number 2?
Number 2 will be in a year, as I write as quickly as I can. So the post-apocalyptic involves just turning the world upside down and seeing what falls out, and the second book kind of turns it right side up again. So I'm really interested in popular culture and technology and society, and I'm kind of exploring that further. Unfortunately, the violence doesn't abate. I don't know why I say unfortunately, because I shouldn't be laughing. Making it up. But it's the second book is kind of about politics in some ways. Although that's hardly a winner with YA. Actually, I can't think of many political YA novels.
No, but I think...
Because we exclude them from the system.
That's right. But if you include it in the context of this world, of what's happened, I think it'll definitely be a great topic. Yeah, for sure. Well, Chris, thank you so much for talking with me, and congratulations on The Young World.
Thank you very much.
Can't wait for number 2.
It's really great to be here. I can't wait to peruse all of the aisles.
All right, please do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What a great conversation with film director Chris Weitz about his first novel for young adults. It's called The Young World. You absolutely have to read this one. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.